So we're going to talk about coaching. And the way that I like to refer to this is, the first is really kind of management 101. There's just basic strategies. This is really kind of the next level, okay? This is 2.0 here, if you will. But the other thing that I think is important to understand in coaching is that you are always coaching, whether it be formal or informal. And so what we want to do is we want to make it deliberate and intentional, because you are always coaching your team at all times, even if you don't realize you're doing it. And so we want to make sure that the way that we're coaching is deliberate and intentional. And so, one of the analogies that I like to use in that, like I like this term, this concept of coaching, but in addition, I also am a coach of athletes, and I coach football, and along with a lot of other things, but football is really, I spend a lot of hours on a football field. And, one of the things that I've had to learn as a coach of student athletes is that they're always looking at me. And that's how, you kind of understand this concept that you're always coaching, because they look to me to see, like, well, am I kind of goofing off and lax? Well, then that's how practice is going to be. And I don't mean for it to be that way, but if I come in and I'm just kind of having a lighthearted day, well, then I've coached them to learn and understand that, well, in this time, it's okay to be, kind of lax and relaxed. And if I come in and it's, it's going to be a tough day and it's hard and we're really working hard at what we're doing, I'm by my actions and by my words, I'm still coaching and training. If I'm over talking to other coaches and we're doing something, like I'm still conveying a message. I'm constantly communicating to them something. And so what we want to do in a business environment, especially, is we want to make sure that our coaching is very intentional, and we need to understand that everyone needs coaching. Everyone should be coached at all times. We typically, in a business, think of coaching as something we do with underperformers, but that's not the case. We coach everybody all the time. Everyone needs to be coached. Just like you have mentors that you maybe look to, people that you respect, well, in a way, those people are coaching you, but again, it may be informal and unintentional. So what we want to do is flip that switch to say, well, let's make it formal and intentional. And so everyone from our top performers to bottom performers, everyone needs to be coached. And we're going to talk about the 3 styles of coaching that you're going to do depending on where someone is in their career and where they are in their expectations. But so the challenge in this coaching concept is it's not, and the reason it's kind of the 2.0 version of this is because the 4 walls are very kind of cut and dry. They're very clear cut. I'm providing definition. I'm providing autonomy. I'm encouraging sociability. I'm giving recognition. Like, they're very clear. Like, I can say right now in this moment, this is what I'm doing. And so, as an example, I've had people kind of challenge me, and I don't mean in a bad way, but I've had people kind of challenge me before to say, well, today, what did you do to further create definition? Well, I can go back and talk about, well, in this meeting we talked about these things, and that was creating definition. And then after that, we encouraged sociability in this setting, and we did. Like, you can kind of go back, and it's very clear cut. Coaching is kind of a constant. It's like the wind blowing. It's a constant thing that's always happening. Okay, and so it's not quite as clear cut. It's not something you can necessarily go to and say, oh, well, in this moment of the day, I was coaching. And so it really has to be kind of a mindset that you take to say, how am I going to address and handle and work with this individual person? What coaching strategy am I going to use as I work with them? And so it's not quite as tangible as the other 4 things that we talked about. One of the things that you have to make sure that you understand in this coaching piece is you've got to kind of do an assessment of where each individual person is in their career and where they are in meeting the expectations that have been outlined and set. But then the other thing, and this is where this becomes a bit of a challenge, is you need to make sure that they also believe that same thing. So I talked last time about calibrating, and I talk about calibrating a lot. Like, you got to get calibrated through this definition piece and then through recognition. That's how you calibrate. Are we on the same page all the time? Well, so in these coaching concepts, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're constantly calibrated. And so as you set out from here today, and as you start thinking about the individuals on your team, you may start to recognize we probably aren't, and you're going to say, they think they're really, really good, and they're really, really not. And you've got to get on the same page before you can really implement a coaching strategy with them, okay? So we'll talk more about that because there's one specific coaching strategy that you typically see that variance in. And so, but one example that I have of that is that there's an old story that, there's an employee that was just amazing, just does a great job all the time. And one day the manager walks in and the employee had gotten there early and they painted the walls purple. And the manager comes in, what are you doing? Why would you do that? I don't know. I just felt like the wall should be purple today. And whenever you experience something like that, it's like, it's not that you're bad at your job, there's just something off. And oftentimes that's what you run into in this coaching and where you don't get that calibration. And actually, I had someone one time that worked for me in an organization, and that's how I kind of used to refer, like I felt like she was going to paint the walls purple one day. And so we were actually sitting down, and she felt like she was a top performer and didn't understand, why am I not getting these promotions? Why am I not getting elevated as a lead and as a senior? And why am I not being included in these conversations? Because she was so good at her job. I mean, just top notch. But there were these little things, these little kind of ticks, if you will, that were just kind of set her apart a little bit. They would say, when you do this, it's not that it's bad, it's just off. And the concern is, because of these things that are happening, I don't know if you're always going to make the right choices. And so we had to sit down and kind of have that conversation. And I actually made the comment, I said, have you ever heard the story about painting the walls purple? And so I told the story, and I said, and sometimes I feel like you're going to paint the walls purple. And so we have to fix that. Like we have to receive that. Well, good. We had a good relationship. And, at that point, we'd worked together for a couple of years, and we had a very good relationship.
So that's the key right there.
It was the relationship. First. Absolutely. And so, so I told the story, and I said, sometimes I feel like you're going to paint the walls purple. And fortunately, she kind of laughed. And I said, there's just certain things. And so what I was able to do, though, that was our calibration. But then from there, I was able to point those things out in the future, whereas I never felt really comfortable doing those things in the past. And so as we move forward, when something would happen, we could kind of meet, and I had one-on-one time every week with each individual person on my team, and whenever we'd meet, I'd be like, okay, remember whenever this happened yesterday and you kind of blurted this out? Or remember whenever you came into this meeting late and you did this and you made an entrance? Or whenever, like that was a purple wall. And so we were able to kind of start referencing that. Like, that was a purple wall for you. That was that thing that, is it wrong? No. Does it concern me for your professionalism overall and how you're going to be able to handle these kind of higher level issues? Yeah, it kind of does. And so let's start to point these things out so that you can understand where the concern comes in. But that can be a difficult conversation to have, and I wasn't sure how it would go. I mean, even with a good relationship, you never know. Whenever you tell someone, I'm afraid you're going to paint the walls purple, like it could go bad. But we have to calibrate, because if we aren't on the same page, how can I ever coach her to do better? And so that is very important, that as you start thinking about this coaching strategy, there are some people you're going to know this is where they fall. But there are others, there's going to be some gray area, and you need to make sure that you and the individual are on the same page, okay? So the first coaching strategy is coaching to excel. And these people typically get left behind in the coaching world, because these are your top performers. Like, these are the big dogs. These are the ones that really you should probably be working for already. It's that person that you say, next promotion, they're getting it. And so what happens is we get busy as managers, and we've got other things going on, and so we just kind of let them go. It's fine. They know what they're doing. They're exceeding expectations. This is the person that like, they're getting the biggest raise, they're getting the next promotion. These are your top performers. And so what happens is we typically just let this person go. We just kind of let them move on and do their thing, and we don't take time to kind of come beside them and continue to lead them. So whenever you have someone with this strategy that you're going to take in this coaching strategy, expectations are being met. Like, if someone is not meeting basic expectations, they can't fit into this strategy at the end, okay? But you can envision either someone in your own team or someone in a department that you work in, or someone in the company that you can almost kind of put a face with this model, this concept. Like, these are peak performers. And so these are people that want to advance. They want more responsibility. They want additional accountability. Like, they want that next challenge. And so what I encourage you to do in that is use that to your benefit. Leverage that. And so leading them looks a lot different than people in different coaching strategies. Leading them is where you include them in decisions and in strategies that are being made within your area of responsibility. Leading them includes, maybe you have the opportunity to have someone as an acting manager while you're out on vacation, or this is your go-to person, or if you're super busy and someone comes to you with a question, you say, you know what, why don't you go ask Wes about that? He can probably help you. I think he's been through that situation before. Like, that's how you want to help lead this person and coach them, is you want to naturally elevate them. And then the other thing that you want to do is you want to treat them and speak to them as though they are already in the role in which they're trying to get to. And so part of that comes in that calibration again. What you want to understand is, what does their career path look like? Not what do you think their career path looks like, but what do they think their career path looks like? Because it may or may not be with you or in your department. And that's okay. If someone, in fact, after we were talking about this yesterday, I think it was Terry maybe that came up and was talking to me about the director of IT started as a maintenance person. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so that's such a perfect example of this, because whoever was leading him along the way, at some point, it's easy to say, IT, you're in maintenance. No, I need you to do a better job of fixing a toilet, as opposed to saying, oh, you have a passion for IT? You know what, we've got this new initiative they're working on, or, I'm really busy. Could you go over there and help kind of get them in the room and make sure that the technology is working the way that we need to? It's helping understand, like, what's the path that you're looking for, and how can I encourage you towards that path? And so that's where calibration is going to come in for this type of person, is you've got to kind of have that sit down and say, what do the next 3 years look like for you? What do the next 5 years look like for you? Where's your passion? What do you want to do? And if they want to move up within your area, within your department, that's great. And then encourage that. Have them thinking about things that happen in that area, and how would you handle this situation? Whenever they come to you with a question, don't just answer it, but say, well, that's a good question. So you want to be a manager? You want to have my job someday? How would you handle that? How would you do that? And allow that to be a learning opportunity for them. Now, again, that's not the quickest, because the quickest is give them an answer and move on. But you aren't valuing them whenever you do that. So what you're doing is you're going to encourage them to learn and to think and behave differently. The other thing that you do differently with someone in this coaching strategy is you really dive into the why instead of just the what. And so instead of talking to people about, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, this is a new initiative that's come down from the CEO, or this is something new that we're doing in our department, or as we go back and we define expectations, instead of just saying this is what the expectations are, for someone that's in this coaching strategy, you're going to talk about why. Why are we doing this? What's the big picture? What's the higher level? What's the greater impact? What does this mean for the organization? What does this mean for the department? Because you want to get them thinking about that. Get them thinking about the fact that they are making a greater contribution than just simply this one project that they're working on. And so the challenge, and there's several reasons why we don't coach these people. One is, like we'd already talked about, we're busy, they're already meeting or exceeding expectations, and we feel like we can move on. But the other one that I hear often is, well, if I do that, I'm going to lose them. I'm going to help them get the next job. So what I want you to understand in that is, you're going to lose them anyway. They are moving on. They're driven. So you're going to lose them. The question is, do you lose them and them say, she didn't do anything to help me? Or do you lose them and they say, she was such a great boss. Like, I really enjoyed my time. Like, she really helped me and prepared me for this role. And the reason I encourage you to make sure that when they leave, it's with that second idea, is because you may be working for them someday. If they're that driven and they're that good, you never know. And so you want to make sure that when that time comes, you can ride their coattails, because they look back and say, this person really helped me. And so, speaking as a young professional that really kind of excelled in my career early on, I can point to and name names of the people that I felt like held me back and those that helped me out. And those that helped me out, when that call comes through on my cell phone, I'm answering it right now to say, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Because I know you helped me. And those that didn't, you say, I'm just not real concerned about their success. And that's when you really see a servant leader right there, is someone that knows, well, you're probably better than me. You're probably smarter than me. You're a better worker. You're more driven, and you're going to reach higher levels in this organization or in your career. But while we're here and while we're in this moment, I'm going to help you. I'm going to do everything I can do. That is true servant leadership. And so we sometimes think, well, I just can't risk losing this person, so I'm going to try to hold them back. But the reality is you're going to lose them anyway. So help them, encourage them, be part of their decision-making process, and help them through the course of their career, whether that be because they're a maintenance person that wants to get an IT, or whether that be because they want your job. And if so, that's fine. Help them understand what your job really takes to do, so that whenever they get there, that you've come alongside them and moved them in that direction. So let's go over to our workbook here for a little bit. We're going to go to page 11. And we're going to talk about coaching to excel. And so the first question is this. If you have someone that is ready to be coached to excel, what might their career path look like? And so if you don't have anyone in mind right now, that's fine. Everything in here is designed so that you can go back at some point when you do reach that moment, that you can kind of go back and say, now, what do I need to be thinking about? But if you have someone, what you want to think about whenever you're coaching to excel is initially just think through what might their career path look like. Do you really think that they are looking to excel in your area of responsibility, or might they have a passion outside of that? And then, because that kind of helps you get a baseline. Now, ultimately, what you need to do is go back to them and talk to them about that and find out straight from them, where do you want to be? What does your career path look like? But if you can start to kind of get a general understanding, then you can start to develop what your coaching strategy is going to look like with them. And then the second thing is, how can you help them navigate this career path? And so, again, you just want to think about, if they're a maintenance person that wants to be in IT, well, how do you help them? Like, that's a big jump. And so what are some things that you can do to encourage that passion? What are some things that you can do to get them additional experience in that field, in that area that they want to go? If it's someone that wants to remain with you or in your area of responsibility somewhere, what are some things that you can do to help them understand kind of the bigger picture of what you do and what your area is for and the strategies that are there? What are some additional responsibilities that you can continue to kind of put on that person and to encourage them to develop that craft that's going to make them more successful when they step into that role? Because what you want to think about, especially if someone's looking to advance in your area of responsibility, is the more you can prepare them now to get there, then they get there and they hit the ground running, instead of having a 12-month training period that they've got to. And now your job continues to be easier because now you've got a peer that already likes and appreciates what you do, and that you work well with because of the relationship that you built, and you aren't having to pick up the slack on their work because they understand how to do that work. And so what are some ways that you can help navigate that career path? And then the third question being additional responsibilities you can give this person to give them a greater sense of achievement and prepare them for the future. So this kind of goes back to this idea of, what are maybe some things that you have on your plate that you could hand them and say, you know what, you have authority to do this. I'm going to let you do this, and give them some opportunity and some experience. People that are going to fall into this coaching strategy are typically driven enough that they can take on more than what others are going to be able to take on, and they want that. And so if they want that, give it to them. Don't let them just sit and twiddle their thumbs and be bored. Give them those responsibilities. Give them other things that they can do and work on and encourage that in them, which again kind of frees you up to maybe go work on some other things or focus on some other team members that you need to be coaching and require a little more attention. And so leverage the skill sets that you have in those people whenever you are trying to coach to excel, and you've implemented this coaching strategy. So the next coaching strategy that we're going to look at is coaching to improve. So The first type of person is your peak performers, and we don't want to leave them behind. We want to coach to excel and help them continue to really drive forward and excel in their career. The next is when we're going to coach to improve. There's typically two employee types that fit into this coaching model. The first one is kind of the definition of stability. It's that person that's been in the role for 5, 8, 10, 20 years, not going anywhere, comfortable with where they are. They don't need a promotion. They don't need more money. They don't need a bunch of recognition. They're just kind of toeing the line, nice and steady, okay? And so this is kind of the second type of person that often gets left behind. In fact, more so than even the coaching to excel. This is the personality type or the career type that gets left behind most often because they don't want to move up. They don't want any more responsibility. They're fine with where they are. And so we tend to kind of leave them behind as we continue to move forward. And so with this type of person, you're going to implement this coaching strategy of coaching to improve. Because in business, if you are sitting still, you're going backwards. And so we cannot allow people to sit stagnant and sit stale for too long. So whenever you find someone, and again, a lot of times, like this, again, is the type of person you can usually put a face to. Like you know that person that's been in this organization a long time or been in your department for a long time, and they're cool. It's all good. I don't need any more. I'm fine. I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to worry about me. And so we get busy with other things, and we say, man, slow and steady wins the race. They just keep going, and it's fine. But what happens is this is the same person. And again, you may be able to put a face on this and throughout your career. This is the same person that's been with the company 20 years and then gets fired. And that's okay.
I did an upgrade, and now
the silent doesn't work. Those upgrades will get you.
Yeah,
I don't like the upgrades. That's okay. You're fine. But so this is that person, they've been with the company 20 years and all of a sudden they get fired because they aren't performing well, and it doesn't make sense, and it's because someone left them behind along the way because we forgot that we needed to continue to move them forward, and they were okay sitting still. And so it's our responsibility as a leader not to let them sit still for too long. And so for someone like this, whenever you're coaching to improve them, you really want to look at long-term goals. You want to look at long-term, really out in the future, 3 to 5 years. And so you're going to look at things like what are some cross-training that they can do? What are some things that they can learn inside the organization that just help make them valuable to the company, to the department, to the organization? You want to look at maybe certifications they can get, things that they're interested in, how you can get them certified, get them continuing education. What are some things online that they can learn? And that way, at least incrementally over time, they're continuing to advance just a little bit. And so whenever you have someone that's in that stability form, your improvement coaching strategy is very long-term. And what you don't want to do is let that person fall behind because they may not have issues under your tenure, but they will under someone's if we let them go. And so it's easy for these people to fall through the cracks. And then all of a sudden we realize, man, they don't understand this new technology. Or we've implemented new processes and they just don't seem to get it. And then they just start falling further and further and further back. And it's because someone didn't come alongside them at some point and say, look, I know you're comfortable where you are, but I can't let you stay completely there. Like I've got to just make sure incrementally over time you continue to move forward and move forward. And so the second employee type that you look at in this coaching model are those that want to excel but just aren't there yet. Okay, so go back to the young lady in painting the walls purple. That's the personality type that you also want to use this coaching strategy with. It's that person that wants to do more. They want to excel. They want to promote. They want to get better. But they just aren't there. They aren't meeting just kind of the standard expectations quite yet. And so what you want to do is, with this type of person, then you're looking at short-term goals. So that slow and steady, you're looking long-term. The one that's driven to excel, but they're not there, you want to look at short-term. What are some things short-term that we can kind of incrementally improve on? And so this is probably the most critical employee type for calibration because they think they're ready for the next level. You don't think that they are, and you've got to make sure that you're on the same page there because if not, all coaching could come across incredibly negative because they're saying, well, why are you telling me this? Why are you doing this? I know what I'm doing. I already know how to do this. I don't need you managing me. I don't need you overseeing me. And so you've got to make sure that you're on the same page and understanding this is where you are. And if you want to be at the next level, I want to help you get there. But we have to make sure we know what level we're on now if we want to get to the next level. And so the calibration for this employee type is probably more important than any other employee type in the coaching strategies. And so what you want to start doing is you want to start changing their perception and outlook on things. You want them to think a little more high level. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to start diving into strategies, and that doesn't mean you're always going to go necessarily straight to kind of the why are we doing these things, but you want to start changing the perception and outlook just a little bit, getting them to think about things differently, getting them to think about what things could be, what their performance could be over a period of time. This coaching strategy with this employee type takes more time than any other coaching strategy, and it requires more patience than any other employee type, and it requires patience by both sides. But it can be so incredibly rewarding if you can get through this. This is typically the employee type that you say and think they probably need to be fired. But the reality is they don't, because they bring a lot of value to the organization, and they can bring a lot of value to your department. But it's one of those that it's a nuisance, it's an annoyance, the things that they do and the way that it's just not perfect. And so oftentimes we think, you know what, it's going to require so much work, let's just get rid of them. But the reality is the person that you want to fall into this coaching strategy, they can bring a lot of value to you and really help you in your department, and certainly add a lot of value to the organization. And so it requires a lot of patience and feedback. That recognition piece of the four walls has to be constant, because what you're constantly trying to do is kind of change the approach, change the perception, make sure that you're getting them back on, like, what you did here is right, do that again. This was right, do that again. It requires a lot of feedback. This was off a little bit, that's fine, this is what we expect, and let's go back to this. And so it requires a lot of feedback, they require a lot of attention, and it requires a lot of patience. The other thing that I want people to understand in this is that this is not a fast turnaround. It takes a while. And so what I typically say is expect about 6 months at least before you really start to see a change in someone, before you really start to see a turnaround. Because the first thing they've got to go through is kind of an acceptance period that maybe I'm legitimately not ready for the next level yet. And then they've got to start changing attitudes, they've got to start changing perceptions, they've got to start changing actions. And that takes a while. Typically you're looking at 3 to 4 months to really start to change what they're doing and change actions. But then where the real patience comes in is that this person knows that they're doing it well, and no one's recognizing it yet. They still are known as the person that is painting the walls purple, even though they're not painting the walls purple anymore. And so it requires a lot of patience by them as well, because what happens is, if you have someone that just messes up this report every single week, and they've been doing it for the last 2 years, then everybody just knows, well, if you get a report from Susie, anyone named Susie? Okay, so if you get it, just making sure, if you get a report from Susie, better double check it, because it's going to be wrong. And so, that's out there. Everybody knows Susie doesn't know how to do this report. And so not only does Susie have to do the report right for a long time, but then you got to change other people's perceptions of that as well. Because then you almost have to have that aha moment in other people that they say, well, if you got that report from Susie, you better. Actually, she hadn't messed that up in a while. Well, now I'm starting to look for it. Well, let me see that report from Susie real quick. Well, I'll be dang, she got it right. But that didn't happen the first time Susie got it right. It didn't happen the 12th time she got it right. It takes a while. But what happens is Susie says, I got this report right the last 3 weeks. Why isn't everyone recognizing this yet? And so it takes a while to really see that shift. And so, because you're really, what you're doing here is you're changing behaviors. And whenever you change that behavior, it's got to be constant, it's got to be consistent, but then it takes time for other people to see that behavior has been changed. And so even once Susie knows that she's doing it right all the time, and you as the leader and the manager know that Susie's doing it right all the time, it doesn't mean Susie automatically now, okay, she's been doing it right for a couple months, she's ready to go over, I'm going to change my coaching strategy with Susie. because it takes a while to really just say, this is now the norm. This is how it is. This behavior has been changed, actions have been changed, and this is the new norm that we're living on. And so what you're trying to do is create a new norm, okay? And one of the ways to do that, I didn't talk about this yesterday, but one of my favorite analogies. Anybody familiar with the concept of a burning platform? So the burning platform was really kind of a management strategy back in the 80s that was taken very negative. But I think there's a lot of positive concept that comes from this. And basically what it says is, if I want to go from this platform to this platform, what's the best way to guarantee we can do that?
Burn it.
Burn it. Get rid of the platform that we're on. This is no longer an option, okay? So imagine in a business, if we say, well, we're trying to change the way that we care for our patients. Well, how do we go from the way we're doing it now to the way we want to do it? Is say the way we're doing it now is no longer an option. It's not even a possibility. And so the way to do that is burn that platform, okay? Now, the reason it can create kind of a negative connotation is because what we're saying is we're getting rid of it. It's wrong. Well, that's the way we've always done it. And so it's kind of a difficult thing to imagine, but that's kind of what we're doing here, is we're saying, you want to be here, but right now you're here. Well, the best way for me to get you here is say, this is no longer an option. You can't do this anymore. These aren't acceptable behaviors. And so we're going to burn this platform. And in business, we do that fairly regularly as we look at strategies. We just don't call it that. We call it much nicer things now. But really, those are the kind of the same things we're doing, is we're saying, well, we need to get from here to here. So we're at $8 million. We need to get to $10 million. How do we do that? Is we make it $8 million. We can't operate on $8 million anymore. And that's the best way to ensure that we're going to get to $10 million. $8 million is no longer an option. And so that kind of forces that change in idea, strategy, concept, behavior, and actions. And so that's the same thing we're doing whenever we're coaching someone to improve that's in this, is we're saying previous behavior is no longer an option. We're going to change behavior, we're going to shift actions. And so the key thing, like if there was a chalkboard, this is what I would write on the chalkboard, okay? So it's important, it's going to be on the test. You want to look for progress and not perfection. And this is where we tend to get caught up. But you want to look for progress and not perfection. And as a manager, oh my gosh, it's frustrating. Because you've outlined this expectation and it's so crystal clear. This is all you need to do. Susie, you just need to get this report right. Your calculations are wrong, just fix it. And you didn't do it? Are you serious? How can you mess this up again? I want it to be perfect because I've explained it. But what you need to understand is, well, it was 80% right this time, and it was only 70% last week. That's progress. We're getting there. And now it's 83% right next week, and we're getting there. And so we're looking for progress and not perfection. And so I'll even go back and let again, let's put this in parenting terms, right? I don't expect my kids to be perfect, but my expectations of my 7-year-old are different than my expectations of my 10-year-old, because progress. He's got 3 more years of learning. He's got 3 more years of life experience. He's got 3 more years of being instructed and kind of moved along. And so my expectations are different. But I don't expect him to be perfect yet. I expect progress. And so that's what we're looking for here, is progress, because we're trying to improve, right? It's a trajectory, and we're trying to improve them. We're not trying to say you have to be perfect now. And so we have to go back to that recognition piece of the 4 walls whenever we are incorporating this coaching style, that we're always recognizing the progress. See the progress and encourage the progress so that people want to continue to move forward. But don't expect perfection. And it's easy to get caught up in that, because we think we've already explained it. We know what's expected. We've told them what's expected. Why can't you get this right? Well, they can't get it right because they were nowhere close to getting it right before. And so we just need incremental wins, just small wins along the journey. And that will help get them to the point that you need them to be and that they want to be. So if we go back over to our workbook here, we'll look at page 12 and this concept of coaching to improve. And so the first thing we want to talk about, we looked at 2 different kind of employment types or personality types that fit into this. And the first one is this person that just wants to remain stable. They're just slow and steady. So if you have someone that wants to remain kind of stable or steady in their position, what forms of additional training can you offer them? Are there any certifications that you have in your area, any certification specific to their role. Maybe it's an administrative assistant. There are certifications out there for administrative assistants to help them be better at their jobs. Maybe there's new technology that's being incorporated and implemented. Maybe there's new research that's being done in your field and that they can go and learn more information about this so that they can be better equipped to do their job. And so just think about what can you do to provide additional training for someone in this role so that you can look at those long-term plans and how they can continue to improve and continue to move forward. The next one is the second personality type that fits into this coaching model, which is someone that wants to excel, but they're not ready. So the first question of that is, are they aware of their challenges? Do they know why they aren't really ready to excel? Maybe they want it, but they're not ready. And do they know? If not, how are you going to address that? And how are you going to do it in a way that they are in agreement with the coaching approach that you're going to take? Now, I don't want to confuse this to say that you're going to go tell every person that works for you, I'm taking a coaching to excel role with you, and with you it's coaching to improve. Like, that's not what you do, but what they do need to understand is, why are you doing what you're doing? And so if they are not aware of the challenges that they have, you need to be sure that you're addressing those in an appropriate way, and then that they are in agreement that I want to help you get there. So can we agree that you're not ready for the next level? Yes. Can we agree that's what you want? Yes. Then can we agree that I want to help you get there? And that's what you've got to make sure that you're in agreement. Because if they say, no, I think I'm already ready for the next level, anything you say from that point forward is going to be negative. It's going to be you being nitpicky, and you're a jerk, and you're mean, and you're a terrible boss. And so you feel like you're doing the right thing, you're trying to encourage them and make them be better, and they're saying, nope, they're just picking every little thing I do apart. I already know how to do my job. So you want to make sure that you are in agreement here, and so that they understand kind of the approach and how you're working through things and how you're talking through things, but that relates specifically to the challenges, and make sure that they understand the challenges that they face. Then what are the short-term goals? So again, the steady and stable person is going to be long-term. This person is going to be short-term. So what are some short-term goals you can put in place to help them achieve greater success? What are some things that you could do right now that you could put in place today that over the next week, month, 3 months can get some incremental successes along that journey, that can start to see some progress along that journey? And then the last one, and understand this one specifically is for you, not for them. This is a question to help you understand, how are you going to define progress and not perfection in this situation? Because you better know that going in, otherwise you're constantly going to be looking for, well, I don't know, was that progress? Was that progress? Well, it's still not where I want it to be. So define what those small wins are before you start implementing this coaching strategy with someone, because as long as you know, then you'll know what to look for. When it happens, that cue will hit, and you'll know, wait a second, that's progress. We're moving forward. Like, that's going to be a win for you. And so you've got to understand what progress looks like in this situation, because it's through that you're going to say, oh my gosh, we might actually be doing something right. So that's not something you necessarily need to share with them, because if you just simply share what the progress looks like, then they're going to strive for that. They need to be striving for something greater. You need to know what the progress looks like and then recognize that as you go along. Okay, so 3 coaching strategies. We coach to excel, coach to improve, and the big one, coach to remove. I know. Bum, bum, bum.
Sorry,
Yeah. Coaching to remove. That's just a reality of business. And a couple of things we need to understand about this. One is it is a legitimate coaching strategy. That it is just that. It is coaching. Okay? So we're not giving up on anybody. And we aren't just pushing them out of an organization. We are implementing a very specific communication and coaching strategy in how we're handling and dealing with someone. The other thing, obviously, this is typically what people think of when they hear about coaching. I'm coaching an employee. People assume this is what it is. Okay? Coaching them out. And that is not the case. And so I want to make sure we're very clear. That's the reason we don't start with this one, because everybody needs to be coached, from your top performer down to your bottom performer. Everyone needs to be coached. So a couple of things before we talk about this, because we all know what we're getting to whenever we start talking about coaching to remove. But I cannot be more clear whenever I say this. Never, ever, ever take this lightly. Like, if you don't lose sleep knowing that you are doing this with someone, there's something wrong with you. I cannot be more blunt about it. It is awful. It is terrible. It's the worst thing you'll do in your career. But as managers, you took on additional responsibility and additional accountability, and sometimes this is part of it. So last time, I told you about my boss Wiggins from back in the day. I told a couple of stories about my good buddy Wiggins. And he said something that has stuck with me ever since then. And we had a guy in our department that was just lazy. And I don't know a better way to say it, like he was just pretty lazy. And so we'd all be working our tails off and he'd be off doing something else. Or he literally would just stand there and talk while we were working. Like, it was blatant, obvious, like, I don't care. And so, it was just one of those frustrating things. And so at the time, I'm 20 years old, maybe 21. And I mean, the obvious answer is like, fire him, just fire him. And I would say it all the time to Wiggins. Wiggins, why don't you just fire this guy? Just get rid of him. And of course, the reality is we hear that a lot. When you see an underperformer. I actually heard someone just yesterday standing in a fast food restaurant, and he made a joke about, well, this is how it's going to be. They ought to fire everybody. Like somehow that just rolls off the tongue like there's no consequence, right? Just fire people. So I made this comment on several occasions to Wiggins that I don't know what we're waiting on. Like, we just need to fire this guy. We got to get rid of it. Like I have anything to do with it. I'm like, Wiggins, you got to fire this guy. There's something, he's just awful. And he said, Gorman, I want you to think about something. And he said, you're not going to get this now because you're still a kid. But one of these days, this is going to make sense to you. I want you to think about waking up tomorrow with no place to go, not knowing how you're going to put food on your table, feed your kids, pay your mortgage, and keep the lights on. And when you realize the severity of what you're doing, when you make a decision to fire someone, you'll second guess doing that. And you're going to give somebody every chance in the world to fix it before you get them there. And so I want to make sure that I impress the same thing on anyone I ever talk to about this. And anytime I'm talking to someone and I'm consulting with companies and I'm coaching people through a transition process and a removal process, I always start with this. Because if you cannot take this decision lightly. And anytime you have someone that you think is in this coaching strategy, start on step 2. Start by coaching to improve. Try to get them somewhere else first. And the last resort is you've got to go to this coaching to remove. And so some things you have to understand whenever you're going to start implementing this coaching strategy. First of all, it's going to be hard. It's going to be very hard, but you can't ignore it. You can't let it go because you're not doing the organization any favors and you're not doing the individual any favors. So my kind of life motto is to help people thrive. Like everything I do, every business that I own, it's all around this kind of one focus, and I want to help people thrive. Not live, not survive, thrive. And I don't believe we're doing people any favors in helping them thrive in life by keeping them in a position that they aren't being successful in. And so what we've got to come to grips with is there are times whenever we start implementing this type of strategy and we know what the end of that path looks like, that we are helping them in the long run. And it's going to hurt in the short. And it's going to hurt us and it's going to hurt them. But in the long run, we very well may be helping them. And so we've got to come to grips with that and understand that. But what we want to think about is that this is not only the right move for the organization, it's the right move for the individual, because most people, they don't want to do poorly in their job. No one wakes up and says, I can't wait to be a screw up today. Like, I can't wait to mess up. It's going to be awesome because everybody else is going to have to do more work because I don't know what I'm doing. Nobody does that. But what we do is we get comfortable and we say, I know I'm not very good at this, but gosh, it's been 7 years since I've interviewed and I just can't imagine going out and doing that. Well, I don't even know. Everything's online anymore. I don't even know how to do that. I don't even know how to look for a job. I don't know what kind of job I would want. So I'm just going to go to work and I'm going to keep trucking along until somebody tells me otherwise. And so there is an aspect of this that you are helping them because you're forcing them to an uncomfortable situation that long-term could help them, okay? And so the first thing that we want to think about whenever we're really looking at incorporating this coaching style is, why are they in this position? Why are they not performing well? Okay, because this helps us sort of define and outline how we're going to go about developing a strategy with them. And so, you could argue there are three reasons people aren't in the right position. The first one just simply being that they were hired into the wrong position, but the reality is that's such a small number of people. Rarely are people just hired just terribly in the wrong position in a place that they're going to underperform. It's typically one of two things. One is anyone familiar with the Peter Principle, this concept of the Peter Principle, right? The Peter Principle basically, in a nutshell, says you've reached your highest level of incompetence. Like, I'm good in this role, and so I get promoted. And I'm good in this role, and I get promoted. And I'm still pretty good in this role, and I get promoted, and now I'm not good anymore. Like, I can't do this. This is above me. I'm in a position that I'm not competent of being successful in. Okay, so that's the Peter Principle. It's been around for years. And that's one of the reasons that people sometimes kind of have to go through this coaching strategy, because they've just reached a level in an organization or reached a level in their career. Maybe they've jumped around, but they finally, like, I finally have become the COO, but I'm completely unorganized and don't know how to implement new projects and don't know anything about funding policies. Okay? But I was a really good director of operations, so I got promoted to COO with another company, and now I'm in way over my head. And so that happens a lot. And when it happens, that's whenever sometimes you kind of have to look into this strategy. And the other thing that happens is that the role changes around them. So again, we have to assume most people aren't hired into a position they're just completely incompetent to do. There's a belief that this person's going to succeed in the position they're in. There's a belief from them. Like, if all I've done in my career so far is I've worked part-time at McDonald's, second shift, like, I'm probably not going to believe I'm ready to be the CEO of any organization, right? Like, I probably know I haven't developed those skills. So chances are I'm not going to apply for that position, and I'm going to be shocked and amazed at someone's bad judgment if they hired me into that position. So you typically aren't going to go into a position that you really don't believe you can be successful in, okay? Just human nature. But what can happen is the role can change around you. You're in a position, and this especially happens, we talked about this first personality type and the coaching to improve. This especially happens with people like this because they're in a role and they're pretty good. They're at least average, and every team needs average people, okay? You don't need a team full of superstars or you're going to lose them all. So every team needs average people, and they're going to be average. They're going to be good. Everything's going okay. And then over time, they become less and less competent at that job. Just over time, things change. Well, we added this new procedure. Well, the next year, we've got this new technology. And then the next year, we've got, kind of new people with new ideas that are changing the way that we do things and new projects. And all of a sudden, you turn around and they turn around and they say, I'm not really good at this anymore. But again, they sure as heck aren't going to go anywhere because they're comfortable and they don't know what to do otherwise. And so those are typically the two reasons that people kind of fall into not being good in their job, okay? And one of the things we have to understand in this is that both of those, and the vast majority of the time, it's oftentimes not their fault. Now, I'm not saying some people don't just change because of life circumstances and all of a sudden they give up. That can happen. But I'm talking about the majority of the time. These are circumstances that happen around people that they did not plan for. They did not go into the position and say, I know I'm going to be terrible at this. And so you want to have some empathy towards the fact that this is not a comfortable situation for them either. And so some things to think about whenever you're coaching to remove someone. The first thing is there a better place in the company that they can thrive? Because the company and the organization has spent a lot of money and a lot of time developing the skills that they already have. They've got them onboarded, they've already got them, and it is amazing how much it costs just to bring someone into their first day. Like, it's thousands and thousands of dollars just to get someone into the first day. So if you've got someone that's already been with the company 3, 4, 5 years, maybe longer, maybe they've been here a year, whatever it is, the company has already invested time and money into them. They've already learned the company culture. They already know the people. There's just kind of a natural onboarding process that happens with that. And the answer isn't always, oh, they need to be out of the company. The answer may very well be, they're in the wrong place here. And so the first thing I would encourage you to do is look at where else might they thrive in the organization, and then work with those departments to figure out whether it makes sense. Now, what I don't want you to do is pawn your problems off someone else because you don't have the backbone to deal with it. But sometimes that's not it. My dad was a school principal, and he one time was going through a seminar series when they were talking about how to deal with difficult teachers. And one of the things they talked about is, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, kind of making it just a little bit uncomfortable for them. And the question was asked, and they said, basically, because in education, like, you can't fire anybody, right? Like, as long as they've been there 3 years, I'm pretty sure they can be there forever. And so it doesn't matter how bad they are, unless they do something immoral, illegal, or unethical, you can't get rid of a teacher. And so the idea was, get them to want to transfer. And the question was raised, but wait a second, aren't I giving someone else our problem? Well, maybe, but maybe not. Now, in your world, you need to figure that out. Don't give someone else your problem. And what that means is, if you have someone that comes in late every single day and you haven't been able to fix it, don't pawn them off on someone else, right? If they are just incompetent and incapable of doing that job, don't pawn them off on someone else. But if they're just not the right fit, if they're just not right where they are, but there's somewhere else in the company that they can thrive, and they want to transfer there, and you think that makes sense for them, do it. That should be the first line of defense. Try to get them there. Work with HR, work with the other departments, and try to get them there. And so the answer that this guy gave whenever he was talking to principals about that, and they said, but if they transfer, and he said, that's great. That's exactly what you want, because they may thrive in another school under new leadership, with new teachers, with new students. That may be the greatest thing that ever happens to them. Now, in their environment, they can't really terminate, so they have to look for alternative options. But I think the same holds true in any business environment. If we can find a place where someone can thrive right there in our own organization, let's look for ways to do it. Because it's going to be a whole lot easier on you, it's going to be better on them, and it's going to be better for the organization. That is a win-win-win. And in any seminar you'll ever do, if you can come up with a win-win-win, you better jump on it. Okay? So that's the first line of defense we want to look at. Where else might they thrive in the organization? But if you go through that question and you say, I just don't think it makes sense, this person is not capable of being a positive contributor to the organization, then you're kind of moving in that direction towards termination. Now, I don't know the exact policies and procedures that Wendell Foster Campus has for someone that's in this situation, but whatever they are, it trumps anything I'm about to say, okay? So when in doubt, follow the policies and procedures of the organization. But these are some things that even through that you can continue to implement. The first is, you need to define very, very clear, crystal clear expectations, timelines, and consequences. Expectations, timelines, and consequences. No one should ever be surprised when they're getting terminated. If they're surprised, you didn't do your job, okay? And so again, I'm be fairly blunt with that. If they're surprised, you did not do your job. No one should ever be surprised when they're being terminated. And so what you're going to do through this process is you're going to say, look, I need to see this, this, and this, and I need to see it in the next 30 days. Otherwise, this is what's going to happen. And so a company that I worked for one time, they had a 6-month termination process that you had to go through with an employee. And so, we had to outline exactly what the expectations were, and everything was 30 days. So I need to see this, this, and this in the next 30 days. And when we sit down at the beginning of next month, if those expectations have not been met, and there's no gray area here, okay? It's not, you need to be nicer. That doesn't work. It has to be very specific. What are the specific things that are not being accomplished now that need to be accomplished? And so I need to see these things that are incredibly tangible, and I need to see them in the next 30 days. And if I don't see them, the next step is going to be a formal review. Are we clear? And then in 30 days, whenever we sit down with that person, you cannot dispute that you did or did not meet these expectations. So again, it cannot be intangible. It needs to be very crystal clear, okay? It needs to be 100% unquestionable. Now, it's a little more challenging when you're dealing with soft skills. So in those soft skills, find the tangibles in the soft skills, okay? You never smile. And so when we're getting complaints from patients that you're unfriendly, and so I expect that when you're with the patient, you're smiling and that you're talking to them. Okay, those are tangible. I can see that. I can see that happen. When I come through the hall, when I see you walk around campus, I can see that. I can visualize that is or is not. And I'm going to recognize it when I do throughout the course of the month. Hey, I saw you over there talking with Gary. Looked like you all having a great conversation. Really appreciate that. That goes a long way towards what we're working on here. Because again, your goal still here is to improve when you can, but you kind of have come to the conclusion we're probably not going to get there, right? So clear expectations, clear timelines, and clear consequences. The next month you sit down and you say, okay, we still didn't meet these expectations. And so I need to see this, this, and this in the next 30 days. And if I don't see this in the next 30 days, then we're going to go to the next stage of the process. So make sure it's clear what the consequences are, up to and including when you are going to terminate. And that's not easy or fun to talk about with someone, but don't beat around the bush. Don't say something like, well, if I don't see these things in the next, 3 or 4 months, then we might have to reevaluate, kind of the direction that you're taking in the company. What did you said nothing. Like, that doesn't mean anything. Evaluate the direction. So that mean I'm not going to get that promotion that I applied for? The direction in the company, the next 3 or 4 months. So does that mean I'm not going to get a raise next year? You have to be clear. If I don't see these things in the next 30 days, then we're probably going to have to look at termination. And I don't want to get there. I know you don't either. So let's see what we can do. You have to be very clear. Now, what I encourage you to think about is the ultimate goal is this. When you are coaching to remove, you have a single goal in mind, and that is to get them released from the organization, right? I mean, above all else, they shouldn't be in the organization anymore. It doesn't matter how you get to that goal, meaning if they quit, you win. And in fact, if they quit, you win-win. So it's okay to make it just a little uncomfortable. And I don't mean in an HR bad way. What I mean is when you start outlining clear expectations and you hold them accountable to those expectations, that's not fun. It's a little uncomfortable, okay? It's a little, man, I'm not going to get that done by the end of the month, and that's going to be hard to do. And that's okay. What I encourage you to do is when they know and you know this is the next step, is termination, be crystal clear about that. Because one of two things is going to happen. Your fight or flight mechanism is going to kick in, and you're going to say, nope, I'm going to fix it because I am not leaving Wendell Foster's campus. This place is too good to me, it's too good to my family, and I'm not going anywhere. Or they're going to say, I guess I need to find another job. And so be it if they do. Either way, you win because they've either improved their performance or they're leaving, which was the goal to begin with. And if they leave on their own, you don't have to terminate. You can leave on good terms. It can all be very positive. I wish you luck. I'm so happy you found this opportunity. Okay? Now, in my environment now, it's a little bit different than it was when I was in a corporate environment. In the corporate environment, it was very structured and strict. Like, this is the direction we're going. But to me, when I knew that it was time that I was going to terminate someone, my goal was to get them to quit. Like, that's what I want. I want them to quit. Okay? And so, by clearly defining expectations, timelines, and consequences, chances are, I'm going to say like 90% of the time, that's what's going to happen. They're going to leave on their own. They're going to go find something else. But if you aren't clear with expectations, timelines, and consequences, you're going to have to fire them. And they're not even know they're getting fired. Now, you talk about a bad day, that's a bad day for everybody. Yeah. So if you can be very crystal clear about this, then ultimately, they're probably going to leave on their own. And when they do, they're going to badmouth you, okay? And that's okay, because you know the truth, and the truth always prevails. You did everything you could. You know the sleep that you lost. You know the extra work that you put in. You know what you did to try to help them succeed. So if they go out and they say, well, gosh, I hated working for Wes, man, it was awful. And the reality is, why was it awful? Well, he expected that report to be right every week. Can you believe that? What a joke. He wanted it right. So it doesn't matter. Let them go talk about you. The goal was you needed them out of the organization because it wasn't a healthy situation, and you got there. So it's so much worse. And I'm telling you, if you haven't had to do this in your career, at some point in management, you're going to have to. Like, the worst days of my career, and I can tell you the days that it's happened, and I can tell you everything that happened in those days, the days that I've had to terminate someone. And in the world that I'm in now, where I own my own business, I can tell you when I do that, I take the day off because it's that emotionally draining for me when I have to do that. I mean, I cannot tell you how awful it is. And so my goal is to get someone to quit. Let them know this is the expectation, and I have to see it in this amount of time. Otherwise, this is what's going to happen. And I hate to say it, but we probably aren't going to have your job for you. And then as soon as you know they're starting to look, help them. Encourage that. They need time off for an interview. And again, consult with HR. But I'm telling you from my perspective, they need an extra hour off for an interview. Good luck on the interview. Anything I can help with?
You need a letter?
Exactly. You need a letter of recommendation. Point out the skills that they have, the things that they were good at. Help them. Okay. I have been a referral source, given testimonials, and written recommendation letters for people that I was terminating by focusing on the strengths. And if they're going into a job that I say, man, that really does cater to your strengths, let me help you with that. I know someone at that company. Let me talk to them about what you can do. Encourage that. Don't. At that point, ego had better leave the door because it doesn't matter anymore. Your goal was to fix an unhealthy situation, and that is a very great way to fix a healthy situation. So the other thing before we kind of move on from this concept of coaching to remove are the 3 Ds of this coaching strategy, the 3 Ds of coaching to remove. Document, document, and document. You protect yourself, you protect the organization. I can't encourage that enough. From the moment you decide this is the direction we're going, you start documenting every single conversation. If it's a pass-through in the hall, you go back and you write it down. If it is a formal review process, you go back and you write it down. Okay? I had one that I went through one time. I had 30 pages, single-spaced, of just me documenting our conversations. And that was the most documentation I've ever had on someone that was going through a termination process. And sure enough, they filed a grievance against the termination. HR put on and it was a large corporation, so when HR does an investigation, it was a pretty serious deal, and my 30 pages saved me and the company millions of dollars in lawsuits. Because I was able to go back and say, this is unedited, candid, within 30 minutes of every conversation we've had. Read it. And so they were able to go through and say, yep, now they said this, and this is the documentation. They're saying this 3 months after the fact. This is what was written at the moment of. This is when they talked to their boss and got approval on this. This is when this happened. This is when that happened. And they were able to go through 30 pages of documentation in a 2-week investigation and say, no, we're clear. We approve termination. Okay. Now, the good news, that person quit. But HR did their due diligence. And if I would have just gone through this process and gotten to the end of it and said, okay, we need to do this, and they file a grievance, and I said, well, no, I just have the reviews that we did every month. Well, now it's my word against theirs. So document everything. And it's time-consuming, and it's hard. But you know what happens? This is where people get left behind, is you have an employee that's been here for years, and you say, I don't know how they've made it this far. It's because no one had the backbone to do this. No one said, I'm going to take the time to do this. And it's not easy, and it's hard, and it's going to be time-consuming, and you're going to lose sleep, and you're going to be stressed out, and your family's going to hate you for a little while while you're trying to figure it out, and you can't talk to anybody because it's all confidential, and it sucks. And it's critical and vital, and you signed up for it when you decided to be a manager, because at some point in your career it's going to happen. Okay? So, that being said, let's look briefly at the workbook on this coaching to remove model. If you have someone that should be coached to remove, now understand this is kind of this is for you, all right? Some of these other things you can kind of refer back to and say, I'm going to make sure that I cover this whenever I sit down with this person. This is for you. This is kind of your checklist to say, am I doing the right thing? Why do you think this person is underperforming? Specific. Not, I just don't like the way they do things. That's you, not them. Specifically, why do you think they're underperforming? The next things you want to look at is what skills do you see in them that could possibly help them thrive with another department or another company or another position. Okay, so as soon as you've made a decision in your head, this person can't stay here anymore. This is not a healthy situation, then I need to be thinking about where can they thrive? What is it? What does that look like? And is it with me or is it with someone else? And if it's with someone else, encourage it. Have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought about going into education? I mean, just the way that you love kids and the way that have you ever thought about that? I have thought about that before. Well, let me see if I can encourage you to do that, because I really think that's a great place for you. So think about that first so that then you can encourage them to move in that direction before you have to go down this process. The third thing you want to think about is what specific expectations are you going to outline? So again, these can't be gray, it can't be vague, it can't be intangible. It has to be very specific. What am I going to outline for this person to say, these are the crystal clear expectations that I have? Okay, so an example that I had one time was something as simple as a filing system. And they were filing things non-alphabetically. There's no question that that happened. Like, you're responsible for this task. It's supposed to be alphabetical. Once a month, I'm going to go in and review it. They weren't alphabetical. Boom. You can't dispute that. Like, I can look at it. It wasn't done right. Okay? There's no question. It's not based on my feelings or emotions. It's there or it's not. And so you want to be very specific with the expectations. So what are those specific expectations you're going to outline? And the last thing is, so what support can you give to help them identify a better path? And again, this is what makes the difference between a manager and a leader, is someone that says, this isn't right for you. Like, this, you aren't thriving here. So we've got to figure out a new solution. How can I help you? How can I help you get somewhere else? How can I help you develop skills to move somewhere else? And you know what? If you think, man, I need them terminated in the next 30 days, but you know in the next 4 months you can find a better place for them to move out, suffer through it for 4 months, because I'm telling you, it's going to be less stressful and it's going to be easier on everybody if you just suffer through it for a little while and help them in that journey, then say, nope, we're going to termination, because that is a challenging road. It's a challenging road. So look and think about what support can you give to help them identify a better path. So what I want to make sure we understand through all of this is, one, you're never going to get any of this perfect all the time, whether it be last month, we talked about the 4 walls, or this month, and we talked about kind of this underlying constant coaching that you're doing with your team. You're never going to get it all right. But the idea is to give you something to go back to say, I need to think about this again. This isn't working. I see an error, I see an issue, I see a concern in my area of responsibility. I need to go back to this. I'm having an issue or a problem with this employee. I need to go back to this. It gives you something to kind of reference and go back to and say, am I doing this properly? Okay? But don't get frustrated because it's not happening perfectly all the time within yourself. But it does give you something to at least strive for, and it gives you a way to maintain focus. And if you do these things properly, it will create less stress on you, because there's a concept, there's a model, there's a strategy, and you're not just going through management haphazardly. That's not what we want to be. Very intentional. I use that word a lot because we want to be intentional and deliberate in how we're doing things. If someone asks you what's your management strategy, you should be able to define it in 30 seconds. My strategy is kind of this. There should be something that goes along with your management strategy. It shouldn't just be simply, I'm a manager, I lead people, right? I boss people, I tell them what to do. You should have a strategy in how you're doing things. And I'm not saying that my strategy is the ultimate strategy. I'm saying it's a strategy. And figure out what yours is. Figure out what snippets of this make sense for you, and figure out how you can adapt the others. But it gives you something, gives you a baseline. It gives you some place to go back to.